The spring rains had been falling for 6 days straight when Benjamin Zarrick realized the old stone bridge had finally given way, and he stood at the edge of the swollen river with a sack of grain over his shoulder and absolutely no way to get home. He had made the trip into Millbrook Village despite the weather because his pantry was running desperately low, and the chickens needed feed, thinking he could make it back before the worst of the flooding hit. That had been a miscalculation born of stubbornness, and the kind of optimism that came from too many years of successful gambles against nature. The water churned brown and angry where the bridge had stood for 3 generations, carrying debris and broken timber downstream in a relentless current that would sweep a man off his feet in seconds. Benjamin set the grain down and wiped rain from his face, staring at the wreckage. The nearest crossing was 15 miles north, and night was coming fast. He could try to make it to the village and find shelter there, but that meant leaving his animals unfed for another day, and the thought of his milk cow lowing in distress made his chest tighten with guilt. He had already been gone longer than planned. He was still weighing his options when he heard the sound of heavy footfalls on the muddy path behind him. Benjamin turned, one hand instinctively going to the knife at his belt, and felt his breath catch in his throat. The orc woman was massive, easily a head taller than him and built like she could uproot trees with her bare hands. Her skin was a deep forest green, darker where the rain soaked through her rough spun tunic and leather vest. Small tusks jutted from her lower jaw, and her black hair hung in a thick braid over one broad shoulder. She carried an enormous pack on her back and a walking staff nearly as tall as she was, and she stopped when she saw him, her amber eyes going wary and flat. They stared at each other across 20 feet of muddy ground. Benjamin's hand stayed on his knife hilt, though he knew it would do him absolutely no good if she decided to attack. He had seen orcs before. Of course there were clans in the mountains to the west, and sometimes they came down to trade furs and medicinal herbs. But those encounters had always been brief and formal, conducted in the neutral space of the market square with plenty of witnesses around. This was different. They were alone, and she looked like she could snap him in half without much effort. The orc woman's gaze moved from him to the destroyed bridge, then to the swollen river. Something shifted in her expression, though Benjamin could not quite read what. She looked back at him, taking in his soaked clothes and the grain sack at his feet, and he saw her jaw tighten. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The rain kept falling, hammering against the earth and turning the world into shades of gray and green and brown. Benjamin's heart was beating too fast, and he told himself it was just caution, just the normal human response to being near something that could kill him easily. Then the orc woman did something he did not expect at all. She turned her back to him, shrugging the pack off her shoulders and setting it carefully on the ground. She said nothing, but she looked at him over her shoulder and jerked her head toward her back in an unmistakable gesture. Benjamin blinked. Rain dripped into his eyes and he blinked again, certain he had misunderstood. The orc woman waited, still not speaking. Her expression was carefully neutral, but there was something in the set of her shoulders that read as impatience. She jerked her head again, more emphatically this time. "You want to carry me across?" Benjamin heard himself say, his voice rough with disbelief. She did not answer. She just stood there with her back to him, one hand braced against her staff, waiting. It was insane. It was dangerous. He did not know this woman, did not know if she could be trusted, did not know what she might want in return. Every story he had ever heard about orcs whispered warnings in the back of his mind: savages, raiders, monsters who killed without mercy. But the river was impassable, and night was coming and his animals needed him, and this stranger was offering help without asking for anything. Benjamin grabbed his grain sack, shouldered it, and walked forward before he could talk himself out of it. Up close, she was even larger than she had seemed. The top of his head barely reached her shoulder. He could see the muscles in her back and arms, could smell leather and pine and something earthy he could not quite place. His hands shook slightly as he positioned himself behind her. "I have grain," he said, feeling like he should explain the extra weight. She grunted the first sound she had made and reached back to grab his leg, guiding it around her waist. Her hand was huge and calloused and surprisingly gentle. Benjamin got the other leg in place and gripped the straps of her vest, trying not to think about how vulnerable this position made him, how easy it would be for her to throw him into the river or dash him against the rocks. The orc woman straightened, taking his weight like it was nothing, and retrieved her staff. Then she waded into the river without hesitation. The current hit them immediately, and Benjamin felt her brace herself against it. The water rose to her thighs, then her waist, dark and swift and full of debris. He pressed his face against her shoulder without meaning to, his heart hammering as a broken tree branch swept past close enough to touch. She moved with careful deliberation, testing each step before committing her weight, using the staff for balance. Halfway across, the current surged stronger and she stumbled. Benjamin's grip tightened convulsively, and he felt her hand come up to steady him, holding him in place even as she fought to regain her footing. Water splashed up into his face and he tasted mud and rainwater, and for a horrible second he thought they were both going under, but she held firm. She did not let go. She took another step and another, and then they were past the worst of it and the water was getting shallower. When they reached the far bank, Benjamin's legs were shaking so badly he nearly fell when he tried to dismount. The orc woman steadied him with one hand on his shoulder, then released him and turned back toward the river without a word. "Wait," Benjamin said. She paused, looking at him with those flat amber eyes. He did not know what to say. Thank you seemed inadequate for what she had just done, for the risk she had taken. She could have drowned trying to help him. She could have ignored him entirely and crossed alone, leaving him stranded on the wrong side with night coming. "My farm is just over that ridge," he said instead, pointing east. "It is not much, but I have a barn, dry space out of the rain. You could shelter there for the night." The orc woman's expression did not change. She looked at him for a long moment, then at the ridge he had indicated, then back at the river. He could not tell what she was thinking. "Your pack," Benjamin added. "It is still on the other side. You would have to cross again anyway." That seemed to decide her. She gave a single sharp nod, then waded back into the river. Benjamin watched from the bank, his heart in his throat again as she fought the current. She made it look easier without his weight on her back, but the water was still dangerous, still full of debris that could knock her off her feet. When she emerged on the far side and retrieved her pack, he let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. The crossing back took just as long. By the time she reached his side again, both of them were soaked through and shivering despite the relative warmth of the spring rain. Benjamin grabbed his grain sack and started up the muddy path toward home, and after a moment, the orc woman followed. They did not speak during the walk. Benjamin led the way through familiar fields now half drowned in standing water, past the old oak tree that marked his property line, up to the small farmhouse with its attached barn. The animals were already making noise, his cow lowing anxiously, the chickens clucking their displeasure at being cooped up so long. "The barn is here," Benjamin said, unnecessarily. He pushed open the wide door and gestured inside. "There is hay and it is dry. I need to feed the animals, but you can settle wherever you like." The orc woman stepped inside and looked around, taking in the neatly organized space, the stalls and the hayloft and the various tools hanging from pegs. Her nose wrinkled slightly at the smell, but she did not complain. She just moved to the far corner, away from the animal stalls, and lowered her pack to the ground. Benjamin fed the chickens first, then measured out grain for the cow, trying not to stare at his unexpected guest. She had removed her wet vest and was wringing water from her braid, her movements efficient and unself-conscious. In the dim light of the barn, her green skin seemed to glow faintly, and he found himself noticing things he had not had time to register before: the way her ears came to delicate points, the intricate tattoos on her forearms, the careful way she arranged her belongings. When the animals were settled, he stood awkwardly by the barn door, unsure what to do next. The orc woman had spread out a bedroll and was checking her supplies, still not speaking. "I am Benjamin," he said finally. "Benjamin Zarrick. This is my farm." She glanced up at him, then back at her pack. For a moment he thought she was not going to respond at all. Then she said, "Grisha," in a voice like gravel and honey. "Grisha," he repeated, testing the name. "Thank you for the river. You did not have to help me." She shrugged, a gesture that seemed to encompass a great deal without explaining anything. Benjamin waited, but no further conversation seemed forthcoming. He shifted his weight, suddenly aware of how cold and wet he was, how much he wanted dry clothes and hot food. "I am going to the house." "To change. I will bring you something to eat." Grisha's head came up sharply at that, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Just food," Benjamin said quickly, raising his hands. "You crossed a flooding river with me on your back. The least I can do is feed you." She studied him for a long moment, and he had the uncomfortable feeling she was measuring something he could not quite identify. Then she nodded once, curtly, and turned back to her pack. Benjamin escaped to the house, his mind whirling. He stripped out of his wet clothes and changed into dry trousers and a clean shirt, then stood in his small kitchen trying to figure out what to feed an orc woman. He had bread, cheese, some dried meat, apples from last fall's harvest. It was simple fare, but it was what he had. He loaded everything onto a wooden tray, added a jug of small beer and 2 cups, and carried it back out to the barn. Grisha had changed as well, he saw. She wore dry leggings and a loose shirt that still could not quite hide the breadth of her shoulders. Her hair was loose now, falling in damp waves around her face, and without the braids she looked younger somehow. Less intimidating, at least until she turned those amber eyes on him, and he remembered exactly what she was. Benjamin set the tray down on an overturned crate between them. "It is not much," he said, "but you are welcome to it." Grisha looked at the food, then at him. She reached out slowly and took a piece of bread, tearing off a small chunk and chewing it carefully as if testing for poison. When she did not immediately keel over, she took a longer bite. They ate in silence. The rain drummed on the barn roof, and the animals settled into their evening routine, and Benjamin tried to think of something to say that would not sound completely idiotic. He had 1,000 questions: where she was going, why she was traveling alone, whether she had family waiting for her somewhere, but they all seemed too personal, too invasive. "The bridge has never flooded like that before," he said finally, falling back on the safest topic available. "It stood through the great rains 10 years ago. I did not think it would ever come down." Grisha swallowed a bite of cheese. "Old stone," she said. "Weak mortar saw the cracks." Benjamin blinked. "You noticed that when crossed it this morning, coming south." She took another bite, chewing thoughtfully. "Knew it would not hold another day, and you still came back to help me cross." She gave him a look that suggested this was a stupid observation. "You needed to cross. I could have drowned. We both could have." Grisha shrugged again, that same eloquent gesture that said everything and nothing. She poured beer into one of the cups and drank deeply, her throat working. When she lowered the cup, there was a faint line of foam on her upper lip that she wiped away with the back of her hand. Benjamin found himself staring and forced his gaze back to his own food. This was insane. He was sitting in his barn sharing dinner with an orc, and instead of being terrified or disgusted or any of the things he was supposed to feel, he was noticing the curve of her jaw and the way her hair caught the lamplight. He needed to get a grip on himself. "Where were you headed?" he asked, desperate for distraction. "Before the bridge went down, south," Grisha said. "Looking for work." "What kind of work?" She hesitated, and he saw something complicated cross her face. "Anything. Farm labor, harvesting, protection." She said the last word with a slight edge, as if expecting him to react badly. Benjamin thought about that. Orcs were strong, that was undeniable. And the frontier was always dangerous bandits, wild animals, the occasional raid from mountain tribes. It made sense that someone might hire orc muscle for protection, even if the social cost was high. "There is a logging camp about 20 miles south of here," he said. "They might need workers. The spring cut is starting." Grisha nodded, filing that information away. "Your farm, you work it alone?" "For 3 years now," Benjamin said. "Since my father died. It is not much, just enough to keep me fed and put a little aside each season." "No wife?" The question was blunt, typical of what he was learning was her style. Benjamin felt his cheeks heat slightly. "No, no wife. Most of the young women from around here have moved to the cities. Better prospects there than marrying a dirt farmer." Grisha made a non-committal sound. She had finished her bread and was working on an apple, her sharp teeth making quick work of it. "You manage well enough. Animals are healthy." "Fields looked good, what I saw." The compliment, understated as it was, warmed him more than it should have. "Thank you. I do my best." They fell silent again, but it was a more comfortable quiet this time. Benjamin let himself relax slightly, let the warmth of the food and the shelter sink into his bones. Outside, the rain was finally starting to ease, though the sky was still dark with clouds. "You can stay until the weather clears," he said. "If you want. The barn is yours." Grisha looked at him sharply. "Why?" "Because you saved my life today," Benjamin said simply. "And because it is still raining and I have space. You do not owe me anything for it." She studied him with those unsettling amber eyes, and he had the feeling he was being evaluated again, judged by some metric he did not understand. Finally, she nodded. "One night. Then I go." "Fair enough." Benjamin gathered up the remains of their meal and stood. "I will be in the house if you need anything. Sleep well, Grisha." She grunted in acknowledgement, and he left her there, returning to the house with his thoughts in turmoil. That night he lay awake in his bed, listening to the rain slow to a drizzle and then stop entirely. He kept thinking about the river, about the strength it had taken to carry him across, about the way she had steadied him when she stumbled, about the fact that she had asked for nothing in return. Every story he had ever heard about orcs painted them as violent, as creatures of rage and bloodlust. But Grisha had been nothing but careful with him, almost gentle despite her size and strength. The disconnect bothered him, made him question things he had always taken for granted. Eventually he slept, and dreamed of amber eyes and the sound of rushing water. When Benjamin woke the next morning, the sky was clear for the first time in a week. He dressed quickly and went out to check on the animals, half expecting to find the barn empty, Grisha already gone on her way south. But she was still there, already awake and repacking her belongings with the same careful efficiency she seemed to bring to everything. She looked up when he entered and nodded a greeting. "Morning," Benjamin said. "Did you sleep well?" "Well enough." She cinched the last strap on her pack and straightened. "Rain stopped. I should go." Benjamin felt an unexpected pang of disappointment. Right, of course. I will not keep you. Grisha shouldered her pack and picked up her staff, but she hesitated before heading for the door. The logging camp. 20 miles south. Yes, follow the river road. You cannot miss it, she nodded. Then, after another pause, she said, you should rebuild the bridge or find another crossing. The river will stay high for weeks. I know, I will talk to the village council, see if we can organize a work crew. Benjamin stepped aside to let her pass. Safe travels, Grisha, and thank you again. She looked at him one more time, and he thought he saw something soften in her expression, just for a moment. Then she was gone, striding out into the morning sunlight with her pack on her back and her staff in hand, and Benjamin watched her until she disappeared over the ridge. The next few days passed in a blur of work. The farm needed attention after the long rains, drainage ditches to clear, fences to repair, crops to check for flood damage. Benjamin threw himself into the labor, trying not to think about the orc woman who had carried him across the river, and then vanished from his life as quickly as she had entered it. He went back to the village once the roads were passable and joined the debate about the bridge. The council argued in circles for hours, some wanting to rebuild the exact same structure, others advocating for a new location, a few suggesting that the expense was not worth it and people should just use the northern crossing. Benjamin left frustrated and no closer to a solution. On his way home, he stopped at the small general store to replenish his supplies. The owner, a sharp-eyed woman named Margaret, gave him a curious look as she tallied his purchases. Heard you got stranded on the wrong side of the river during the flood, she said casually. Also heard you made it back anyway. Lucky fellow. Benjamin felt his stomach tighten. I had help, so the stories say. Margaret's eyes gleamed with barely suppressed curiosity. An orc, they say, big green woman who carried you across on her back. That true? Word traveled fast in a small community. Benjamin kept his expression neutral as he counted out coins. It is true. She was crossing anyway and offered to help. Probably saved my life. Probably saved your life, Margaret repeated, her tone suggesting she was already composing the gossip she would share with the next customer. And then what? She come to the farm with you. She sheltered in the barn for one night, then went on her way south, Benjamin said firmly. I fed her dinner as thanks. That is all. Margaret's eyebrows rose. You let an orc sleep on your property. She saved my life, Benjamin repeated, letting an edge creep into his voice. The least I could do was offer shelter from the rain. He left before she could ask more questions, but he could feel her eyes on his back as he loaded his purchases onto his cart. By tomorrow, everyone in the village would know that Benjamin Zarrick had been seen consorting with an orc. The thought made his jaw tighten. Let them talk. He had done nothing wrong. A week passed, then two. The fields dried out enough to work properly, and Benjamin planted his late spring crops, working from dawn to dusk. The routine was familiar and soothing, and gradually the memory of the flood and the bridge and the orc woman faded into something dreamlike, as if it had happened to someone else. He was mending a section of fence at the edge of his property when he heard footsteps on the road. He looked up, expecting to see one of his neighbors, and froze. Grisha was walking up the path toward his farm, her pack on her back and her staff in hand, exactly as she had looked the day she left. Except this time, there was a dark bruise along her jaw and her knuckles were scraped raw. Benjamin dropped his hammer and vaulted over the fence, his heart suddenly racing. Grisha, what happened? She stopped a few feet away from him, her expression carefully blank. The logging camp did not work out. Did they do that to you? Benjamin gestured at her bruised face. Some of it. She shifted her weight and he saw her wince slightly. The rest was the road. Bandits thought I would be easy prey. Were they still alive when you left them? The corner of her mouth twitched, almost a smile. Mostly. Benjamin ran a hand through his hair, trying to process this. Why did you come back here? Grisha was silent for a long moment. She looked past him at the farm, at the neat fields and the little house and the barn, and when she spoke her voice was quieter than he had heard it before. Nowhere else to go. Thought maybe you still needed help. Farm work. Understanding hit him like a physical blow. She was asking for a job. An orc woman was standing on his property asking him to hire her, and she looked like she expected him to say no. Benjamin thought about what Margaret would say, what all the village would say, about the social cost of having an orc working his farm, the whispers and the sidelong looks and the possible loss of trade relationships. Then he thought about Grisha bracing herself against the flooding river with him on her back, about her careful hands guiding his legs into place, her strength keeping him safe, about the way she had asked for nothing in return. I cannot pay much, he heard himself say, but I can offer room and board and a small wage. The barn, if you do not mind sharing space with the animals. 3 meals a day, and the work is hard. Grisha's eyes widened just slightly. You would hire me. You saved my life, Benjamin said. And yes, I could use the help if you are willing. For the first time since he met her, Grisha smiled. It was a small thing, barely there, but it transformed her face. I am willing. Then welcome to the farm, Benjamin said and offered his hand. She looked at it for a moment, then clasped it with her own. Her grip was warm and strong, and Benjamin felt something shift in his chest that he could not quite name. They stood there in the spring sunshine, hands clasped, and Benjamin wondered what exactly he had just gotten himself into. The first few days of their new arrangement were awkward as they figured out how to work together. Benjamin was used to doing everything himself, to moving at his own pace and making decisions on the fly. Having someone else there, someone who worked differently and saw things he missed, required adjustment. But Grisha was a quick learner and a tireless worker. She could lift things that would have taken Benjamin an hour to move with levers and pulleys. She repaired the storm damage to his barn roof in an afternoon, climbing up to nail new shingles in place with a fearlessness that made his stomach drop. She cleared the clogged drainage ditches by hand, hauling out mud and debris until the water flowed freely again, and she was quiet. Not sullen or unfriendly, just not much given to unnecessary talk. She listened when he explained what needed doing, asked clarifying questions when something was unclear, and then simply did the work with a focus that he found oddly restful. They fell into a routine. Benjamin woke at dawn and fed the animals while Grisha did her morning exercises, stretches, and forms that looked almost like a dance, fluid and precise. They ate breakfast together at the small table in his kitchen, then headed out to whatever task the day required. Midday they broke for lunch, usually just bread and cheese eaten in whatever field they were working. Dinner was more substantial, and Benjamin found himself looking forward to those evenings, to the comfortable silence or the occasional conversation about crops or weather or the peculiar habits of chickens. The village noticed, of course. Word spread quickly that Benjamin Zarrick had hired an orc to work his farm, and the reactions ranged from shock to disgust to morbid curiosity. The first time he brought Grisha to the village market, people stared. Some turned away. A few mothers pulled their children closer, as if afraid Grisha might snatch them. Benjamin kept his head high and his expression neutral, buying what he needed and refusing to acknowledge the whispers. Grisha, for her part, seemed unbothered by the attention. She carried the heavy supplies without complaint and kept her eyes forward, her face blank. It was Margaret from the general store who finally said something, stepping out from behind her counter with her arms crossed. "That is quite the farmhand you have got there, Benjamin," she said, her voice carrying to the other shoppers. "Not worried she might eat you in your sleep?" Benjamin felt Grisha tense beside him. He set down the sack of flour he had been examining and turned to face Margaret with a calm he did not entirely feel. "Grisha has been nothing but helpful and hardworking since I hired her," he said clearly. "She saved my life during the flood, as you may recall. I trust her more than I trust most humans I could name." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "That is a dangerous thing to say, Benjamin Zarrick. Orcs are not like us. They are violent by nature. Everyone knows that." "Everyone knows a lot of things that are not true," Benjamin replied. "Now, if you will excuse me, I have shopping to finish." He paid for his purchases and left, Grisha following silently behind. They did not speak until they were back on the road home, the village falling away behind them. "You did not have to defend me," Grisha said quietly. "Yes, I did," Benjamin said. "You work for me. That means you are under my protection, same as I would protect any employee." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, so soft he almost missed it, she said, "Thank you." Benjamin glanced at her and saw something raw in her expression, quickly hidden. He wondered how many people had bothered to defend her in her life. How many had seen past the green skin and the tusks to the person beneath. "You are welcome," he said. After that, things shifted slightly between them. There was still the comfortable routine of work and meals, but there was also a growing ease, a sense of partnership that went beyond simple employer and employee. Grisha started offering suggestions for improving the farm's efficiency, and Benjamin found her ideas were usually good. He started teaching her about the subtleties of crop rotation and soil management, and she absorbed the information like she was starving for it. They talked more, too. Not deep personal conversations, not yet, but small exchanges that revealed bits and pieces of their lives. Benjamin learned that Grisha had grown up in a mountain clan, that she had 3 brothers and 2 sisters, that she had left home after her clan. Elder tried to arrange a marriage she did not want. Grisha learned that Benjamin had dreamed of being a scholar when he was young, that he loved books and mathematics, that he had given up those dreams to take over the farm when his father died. Why not hire someone else to run it? Grisha asked one evening as they sat on his porch watching the sun set over the fields. "Go back to your books," Benjamin shrugged. "This was my father's farm. His father's before that. Selling it or abandoning it felt like betraying them somehow. And besides, I do not hate the work. It is honest. There is satisfaction in making things grow." Grisha nodded thoughtfully. "Your father would be proud. The farm is well kept." The simple compliment warmed him. "I hope so. What about you? Do you ever think about going back to your clan?" Her expression shuddered immediately, and he knew he had touched a nerve. "No, that part of my life is over. I am sorry, I did not mean to pry. It is fine." But her voice said it was not fine, not really. She stood abruptly. "I should check on the animals." She was gone before he could respond, disappearing into the barn and leaving Benjamin alone on the porch with the sinking sun and the feeling that he had made a terrible mistake. He gave her space that evening and the next morning, but by midday, he could not stand the awkward tension anymore. He found her in the vegetable garden, pulling weeds with more force than was strictly necessary. "Grisha," he said. She did not look up. "Yes. I am sorry about yesterday. I should not have asked about your clan." "You can ask whatever you want. It is your farm." "That is not how this works," Benjamin said firmly. "You are not just my employee. You are my friend, at least I hope you are. And friends do not push when someone is not ready to talk about something." That made her look up. Her amber eyes were wary. "Friends?" "Yes, friends." Benjamin crouched down beside her in the dirt. You saved my life, Grisha. You have worked harder than anyone I have ever known. You make terrible jokes about my chickens, and you fixed my barn roof without being asked, and you are teaching my cow to let you milk her even though she normally kicks anyone who tries. So yes, friends. Grisha stared at him, and he saw her throat work as she swallowed. I have not had a human friend before. First time for everything, Benjamin said, trying to lighten the mood. She laughed, a short, rough sound, and some of the tension bled out of her shoulders. The clan thing, it is complicated. You do not have to explain. I want to. She pulled another weed, more gently this time. My clan has traditions, old traditions. When a woman reaches a certain age, the elders arrange a marriage to strengthen alliances or settle debts. I was matched with a warrior from another clan, strong fighter, good hunter. Also cruel and stupid, and I hated him. Benjamin felt anger kindle in his chest. They did not give you a choice, no choice. Refusing would have brought shame on my family. She smiled bitterly. So I left, became a wanderer. It is better than being some brute's possession. Your family must miss you, maybe. But they chose tradition over me. She met his eyes. I chose freedom. I do not regret it. Benjamin understood that, perhaps more than she knew. He had chosen duty over his own dreams, but at least it had been his choice. For what it is worth, I am glad you are here. Grisha's expression softened. I am glad too. This is the first place that has felt like home since I left the mountains. The admission hung between them, honest and vulnerable, and Benjamin felt his heart do something complicated in his chest. He stood quickly, brushing dirt from his knees. We should finish this garden before lunch. I am making stew. You make terrible stew, Grisha said, but she was smiling as she said it. Then you should cook dinner tonight. I will, and you will learn what real food tastes like. She was right. The stew she made that evening was rich and savory, full of herbs he did not even know he had, and cooked with a skill that put his own attempts to shame. They ate together at the kitchen table, and Benjamin felt something settle in him that he had not known was unsettled. This was good. This friendship, this partnership, this strange new life they were building together. It was good. He did not let himself think about the fact that he was starting to notice other things too. The way Grisha moved, all controlled power and unconscious grace. The sound of her laugh, rare but genuine. The way she looked in the early morning light with her hair loose, and her face soft with sleep. He did not let himself think about any of that, because Grisha was his friend and his employee and an orc, and thinking about her any other way was dangerous and foolish, and could only lead to pain. So he buried those thoughts deep and focused on the work and the friendship, and pretended that was enough. Summer arrived in full, bringing long days of heat and hard labor. The crops needed constant attention, weeding, watering, protecting from pests and disease. Benjamin and Grisha worked side by side from dawn until dusk, falling into bed exhausted each night. It was good work, satisfying work, and Benjamin found himself happier than he had been in years. The farm was thriving in a way it never had when he worked it alone. With Grisha's help, he was able to expand the vegetable garden, repair long neglected fences, even start clearing a new field for next year's planting. But the village had not forgotten about his orc farmhand, and the whispers were getting louder. It started with small things. A merchant who usually bought his excess produce suddenly stopped coming by. A neighbor who had always been friendly began crossing the road to avoid him. Benjamin gritted his teeth and ignored it, telling himself it would pass. Then one afternoon, 3 men from the village rode up to his farm. Benjamin recognized them: Robert Zimmerman, who owned the largest farm in the area, Thomas Wright, the blacksmith, and Paul Foster, who served on the village council. They looked grim. Benjamin set down his hoe and walked over to meet them, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Gentlemen," "What can I do for you?" Robert dismounted, his expression stern. "We need to talk, Benjamin, about your worker." "Grisha is an excellent worker," Benjamin said carefully. "Is there a problem?" "The problem is she is an orc," Thomas said bluntly. "People are worried, scared even. Having one of them living here, so close to the village, it is not right." Benjamin felt his temper rising but forced himself to stay calm. "Grisha has done nothing to warrant fear. She works hard, keeps to herself, and has never threatened anyone." "It does not matter what she has or has not done," Paul said. "It is what she is. Orcs are dangerous. Everyone knows that." "Everyone knows what they have been told," Benjamin shot back. "Have any of you actually met Grisha, talked to her? Or are you just repeating stories you heard from people who heard them from other people?" Robert's jaw tightened. "We are trying to be reasonable here, Benjamin. We are not demanding you send her away immediately. We are asking you to consider the good of the community. Find a human farmhand. Let the orc move on." "No," Benjamin said flatly. The three men exchanged glances. "Benjamin, be reasonable," Paul started. "I am being perfectly reasonable. Grisha saved my life, works harder than any farmhand I could afford to hire, and has never given me reason to distrust her. I am not going to fire her because you are all afraid of something that exists only in your imaginations." "This is not just about fear," Robert said, his voice hardening. "This is about property values, about trade relationships, about the reputation of our community. If you insist on keeping an orc on your land, there will be consequences." "Is that a threat?" "It is a warning from a friend." Robert remounted his horse. "Think carefully about this, Benjamin. You are risking everything for a creature that will never be one of us." They rode off, leaving Benjamin standing in his field with fury and fear warring in his chest. He knew they were not bluffing. The village council had power, and if they decided to make his life difficult, they could. Refusing to trade with him, blocking his access to shared resources, even trumping up legal charges if they were determined enough. He could lose everything. He turned to find Grisha standing in the doorway of the barn, her expression carefully neutral. She had heard everything. "You should do what they say," she said quietly. "I can leave, find work somewhere else." "No," Benjamin said again, more firmly this time. "You are not going anywhere. Benjamin, I am not worth this. Not worth you losing your farm, your place in the community." "That is not your decision to make," he interrupted. "This is my farm, my choice, and I choose to keep my word. You have a job here as long as you want it." Grisha stared at him, and he saw something complicated move across her face. "Why? Why would you risk so much for me?" "Because I care about you," he thought. "Because you are the best thing that has happened to me in years. Because the thought of you leaving makes me feel like I am drowning. Because it is the right thing to do," he said instead. "And because you are my friend." She looked like she wanted to argue further, but instead she just nodded slowly. "Thank you." That night, Benjamin lay awake trying to figure out what to do. He could not afford to lose his farm. It was all he had, his entire livelihood. But the thought of sending Grisha away, of caving to the village prejudice and fear, made him sick to his stomach. He was still wrestling with the problem when he heard a noise outside. Quietly, he got up and looked out his window, and his blood went cold. There were torches in his fields. 5, maybe 6 of them moving in the darkness. And voices, men's voices, raised in anger. Benjamin grabbed his boots and ran outside, his heart pounding. As he got closer, he could see them more clearly, young men from the village, drunk and rowdy, trampling through his newly planted crops and laughing. "Hey," he shouted, "get out of my fields." They turned toward him, and he recognized Paul Foster's son among them, along with a few others he knew by sight. "We are just having some fun, Zarrick," the younger Foster called out. Thought we would see if your orc girlfriend is as tough as they say." Before Benjamin could respond, Grisha was there, moving out of the darkness so quickly the men jumped back. She did not have a weapon, but her staff was in her hand and her expression was cold and dangerous. "Leave," she said, her voice low and deadly. "Now." One of the young men, emboldened by drink and the presence of his friends, laughed. "Or what? You will eat us." "I will break every bone in your body," Grisha said calmly. "Starting with the ones in your hands so you cannot hold those torches, then your legs so you cannot run." "Then, that is enough," Benjamin said, stepping between them. His heart was racing, but he kept his voice level. "You have made your point. Now get off my land before I have you all arrested for trespassing and property damage." The young men hesitated, clearly weighing their options. Grisha looked like she could and would make good on her threats, but they outnumbered her. For a tense moment, Benjamin thought it was going to turn into a fight. Then one of them, slightly less drunk than the others, grabbed Foster's arm. "Come on. This is stupid. Let us just go." Slowly, reluctantly, they backed away, still hurling insults but moving toward the road. Benjamin and Grisha stood side by side, watching until the torches disappeared into the distance. When they were finally alone, Benjamin let out a shaky breath. "Are you all right?" "Fine." "You, angry?" "Scared." "Both." He looked at the damage to his field, the trampled seedlings and the scorch marks where someone had tossed a torch. It was not catastrophic, but it was not nothing either. "This is going to get worse, is it not?" Grisha's jaw was tight. "Probably." "Cowards like that, they will come back, bring more friends. Eventually someone will get hurt." "Then what do we do?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I really should leave, Benjamin. This is only going to escalate. And if you leave, they win. They learn that threats and vandalism get them what they want." Benjamin turned to face her fully. "I will not give them that satisfaction. This is not about satisfaction. This is about keeping you safe." "What about keeping you safe?" Benjamin demanded. "Do you think they will just let you walk away? More likely they will wait until you are on the road alone and then finish what they started tonight." Grisha's expression flickered, and he knew he had hit on a fear she had not voiced. "I can take care of myself." "I know you can. But you should not have to, not alone." Benjamin took a deep breath, trying to organize his thoughts. "We need a different strategy, something that makes it harder for them to justify harassing us." "Like what?" "I am not sure yet, but there has to be something." He ran a hand through his hair. "Come on. Let us go inside, make sure they did not do any other damage. We can figure this out in the morning." They checked the barn and the house, but aside from the damaged field, the vandals had not touched anything. Benjamin made tea and they sat at the kitchen table, both too keyed up to sleep. "Tell me about your clan," Benjamin said abruptly. Grisha looked surprised. "Why?" "Because I want to understand. How do orcs handle this kind of thing? Conflict with outsiders, I mean." She considered that. "Depends on the clan. Some would fight back immediately, hard and brutal, make an example of anyone who threatened them. Others would try to negotiate, find a peaceful solution. My clan was somewhere in between. Strong enough that most people did not dare attack us, but willing to trade and coexist when possible. And if someone did attack, overwhelming response, decisive, make it clear that there would be consequences for aggression." She smiled grimly. "It usually only took once." Benjamin thought about that. "I do not think breaking bones is going to help our situation here, but maybe there is a middle ground. Show strength without violence. Make it clear I am not going to back down." "How?" "I am not sure yet, but I will think of something." He met her eyes. "I am not giving up on this, Grisha, on you. I know that probably sounds foolish." "It does not sound foolish," she interrupted softly. "It sounds like friendship, real friendship, the kind that is willing to pay a price." Benjamin felt his throat tighten. "You would do the same for me." You already did when you carried me across that river. That was different. That was just survival. Was it? Benjamin leaned forward. You did not know me. I could have been anyone, a thief, a murderer, someone who would turn on you the first chance I got, but you helped me anyway. You took that risk because you saw someone in need and you chose kindness. That is who you are, Grisha. Do not pretend it was just survival. She looked away, but not before he saw her eyes shimmer. You see too much. I see you, Benjamin said. The person, not the orc. And I am not going to let a bunch of small-minded bigots drive you away. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of everything hanging between them. Finally, Grisha stood. I should try to sleep. Long day tomorrow, fixing what they broke. Grisha, Benjamin said as she reached the door. She paused, looking back at him. Thank you for tonight, for not breaking any bones even though you could have. The corner of her mouth quirked up. The night is still young. She left, and Benjamin sat alone in his kitchen, staring at his cold tea and wondering when exactly his life had gotten so complicated. The next few weeks were tense. Benjamin made a point of going to the village more often, always bringing Grisha with him, making it clear he was not ashamed or intimidated. They worked in the fields in full view of the road, visible to anyone who passed by. He wanted everyone to see that they were not hiding, not afraid. The vandalism stopped, but the isolation got worse. More merchants refused to trade with him. People he had known his whole life crossed the street to avoid him. The village council sent an official letter warning him that he was violating community standards and could face sanctions. Benjamin wrote back saying he would see them in court if they wanted to pursue it. He did not hear back. Through it all, Grisha worked quietly, never complaining, never pushing. But Benjamin could see the toll it was taking on her. She was eating less, sleeping less, and there was a tightness around her eyes that spoke of constant stress. One evening, he found her sitting on the fence at the edge of his property, staring out at the sunset. He climbed up to sit beside her. "Penny for your thoughts," he said. She glanced at him, then back at the horizon. "Just thinking. About whether I am being selfish, staying here when it is causing you so much trouble." Benjamin felt his chest tighten. "You are not being selfish. You are working for a living, same as anyone else. The trouble is not your fault, it is the fault of people who cannot see past their own prejudice. That is a nice philosophy, but it does not change reality." She sighed. "I have been thinking about moving on, maybe going west into the frontier territories. There are settlements out there that are more mixed, where an orc would not stand out so much." The thought of her leaving sent a spike of panic through him. "Is that what you want?" "What I want does not seem to matter much." "It matters to me," Benjamin said urgently. He turned to face her fully. "Grisha, you matter to me. This farm is better with you here. I am better with you here. Please do not leave." She met his eyes, and he saw conflict in her expression. "Benjamin, I care about this place too, about you, which is exactly why I should go. You deserve better than to be ostracized by your own community because of me. And you deserve better than to be driven away by people who will not even give you a chance," Benjamin countered. "We can make this work, Grisha. I know we can. We just need time for people to see that you are not a threat, that you are just a person trying to live her life." "How much time? Months? Years?" She shook her head. "And what happens if they escalate? What happens if next time those boys bring weapons instead of just torches? I could not bear it if you got hurt because of me. Then we get help. We find allies. There have to be other people in the region who are not swayed by prejudice." Grisha looked doubtful. "Where? Everyone I have met since leaving my clan has either feared me or tried to hurt me. You are the first person who treated me like I was worth something." The admission broke his heart. Benjamin reached out without thinking and took her hand, his smaller fingers wrapping around her larger ones. Then I will just have to work harder to prove I am not unique, that there are good people out there who will accept you. She looked down at their joined hands, and Benjamin became acutely aware of the warmth of her skin, the roughness of her calluses, the way her fingers twitched slightly against his palm. "You really mean that?" she said softly. "Every word." Grisha was quiet for a long moment, then she squeezed his hand gently. "All right, I will stay, for now. But if this gets worse, if you are in real danger, I am leaving. No arguments." "Fair enough," Benjamin said, even though the thought of her leaving still felt like a knife to the gut. "Thank you." They sat together as the sun finished setting, hands still clasped, and Benjamin let himself feel the full weight of what he was admitting to himself. He did not just care about Grisha as a friend. He did not just value her as a worker. He was falling for her, hard and fast and completely, and he had no idea what to do about it. Because she was an orc and he was human, and the world they lived in did not look kindly on that kind of connection. Because she worked for him, and there was a power imbalance that made any romantic overture potentially exploitative. Because he had no idea if she felt anything beyond friendship for him, and asking would risk destroying the relationship they had built. So he said nothing. He just held her hand and watched the stars come out, and tried to memorize this moment, this feeling of peace and connection, in case it was all he ever got. The opportunity for change came from an unexpected direction. 2 weeks later, a messenger arrived from the regional governor's office with a request for able-bodied workers to help with the harvest at a large estate about 30 miles north. The pay was good, the work temporary, and most importantly, the estate's owner was known for hiring anyone who could do the job regardless of species or background. Benjamin saw it immediately as a chance to prove Grisha's worth to a wider audience. If she worked the harvest and did well, if people from other villages saw her being helpful and reliable, maybe some of that goodwill would spread back to their own community. He proposed the idea to her that evening over dinner. "It is only for a few weeks." The estate owner, Lady Helena Ashford, has a reputation for fairness, and the other workers will be from all over the region. They will not have the same prejudices as our village. Grisha looked skeptical. "You want to leave the farm unattended for weeks during growing season?" "Not unattended. I will come back periodically to check on things, water the crops, feed the animals, and a few weeks of my time is worth it if it means building connections outside this village. You have thought this through?" "I have." Benjamin leaned forward. "Grisha, we need allies. We need people who know you, who can vouch for you when the village council starts spreading rumors. This is a chance to find them." She was quiet for a while, turning the idea over. Finally, she nodded. "All right, we will try it. But if it goes badly?" "If it goes badly, we come home immediately," Benjamin promised. They left 3 days later, the farm secured as well as they could manage. The journey north was pleasant, the summer weather warm but not stifling, and Benjamin found himself relaxing as the miles passed. Away from the village and its watchful eyes, he and Grisha could just be themselves, friends, partners, two people enjoying the open road. They talked more during those days of travel than they had in weeks. Grisha told him stories about her childhood in the mountains, about learning to hunt and fight and survive in harsh conditions. Benjamin shared memories of his father, of learning to read by candlelight and dreaming of universities he would never attend. "You could still go," Grisha said as they made camp one evening. "Study, I mean. There are schools that take older students." Benjamin shook his head. "The farm could be managed by someone else, by me, for instance, if you trust me enough." The offer stunned him. "You would do that?" "Why not? I like the work, and you should get to follow your dreams, Benjamin. You are smart enough for it, talented enough." He felt warmth spread through his chest. "I will think about it, thank you." They reached the Ashford estate on the fourth day of travel. It was impressive, sprawling fields of wheat and barley, orchards heavy with fruit, a manor house that spoke of old money and careful management. Workers were already gathering in the large barn that served as a staging area, and Benjamin felt Grisha tense beside him as they joined the crowd. There were perhaps 50 people already there, and Benjamin was relieved to see a real mix: humans, yes, but also 2 other orcs, a dwarf, and what looked like a half-elf. The diversity seemed to put Grisha slightly at ease. A woman in practical work clothes climbed onto a platform at the front of the barn. She was in her 40s, Benjamin guessed, with gray threading through her dark hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. "Welcome, everyone," she said, her voice carrying easily over the crowd. "I am Helena Ashford, and this is my estate. For the next 3 weeks, you will be helping bring in the harvest. The work is hard, but the pay is fair, and I expect everyone to pull their weight regardless of where you come from or what you look like. We have dormitories set up for sleeping, meals provided 3 times a day, and a healer on staff in case of injuries. Any questions?" Someone asked about working hours, someone else about payment schedules. Lady Ashford answered each query with brisk efficiency, and Benjamin liked her immediately. When the briefing ended, workers dispersed to claim beds and settle in. Benjamin and Grisha ended up in a large dormitory with about 20 others, the sleeping arrangements simple but adequate. They stowed their belongings and headed to dinner, which was served in a large common hall. The food was simple but plentiful, and Benjamin noticed that Lady Ashford herself ate with the workers rather than retreating to her manor. She moved through the hall, stopping to talk with different groups, asking about their journeys and their experience with harvest work. When she reached their table, her eyes lingered on Grisha for a moment before she smiled. "You are a long way from the mountains." Grisha straightened slightly. "Yes, my lady, I work a farm south of here now." "Good, we need strong backs for the wheat. You will be in the cutting crew." Lady Ashford turned to Benjamin. "And you, Benjamin Zarrick, my lady, I can work wherever you need me." "Zarrick." She tapped her chin thoughtfully. "I know that name. Your father was Samuel Zarrick, grew the best corn in the southern valley." Benjamin felt a pang of loss and pride mingled together. "Yes, my lady. He passed 3 years ago. I run the farm now. He was a good man. I bought seed from him several times." Lady Ashford's expression softened. "I am sorry for your loss, and I am glad you are here. We will put you in the orchards. Fruit picking requires a careful hand." She moved on, and Benjamin let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. Beside him, Grisha looked thoughtful. "She knew your father," she said. "Apparently, he traveled more widely than I realized, selling and trading." She respected him. I could hear it in her voice. Benjamin nodded, feeling the weight of his father's legacy. He had spent so long trying to live up to it, to maintain the farm to his father's standards. Having someone like Lady Ashford acknowledge that work felt like validation. The harvest work was brutal. They woke before dawn and worked until dusk, with only brief breaks for water and food. Benjamin's hands blistered from picking fruit. His back ached from reaching and climbing, and he fell into bed, each night too exhausted to even dream. But it was also strangely satisfying. There was something pure about the work, something uncomplicated. No village politics, no prejudice, just the simple equation of labor and reward, and he got to watch Grisha thrive. She was assigned to the wheat cutting crew, working with a long scythe to harvest the golden grain. It was back-breaking work that required both strength and endurance, and Grisha excelled at it. She worked faster than almost anyone else, her movements smooth and efficient, and the other workers began to respect her for it. Benjamin saw it happening. saw the other crew members starting to joke with her during breaks, saw them seeking her advice on technique. One of the other orcs, an older male named Zarrick, seemed particularly pleased to find another of his kind, and spent mealtimes talking to Grisha in the orcish language, the guttural syllables foreign to Benjamin's ears, but clearly meaningful to her. "It is good to see her happy," said a voice beside him. Benjamin turned to find one of the human workers, a woman named Sarah, watching Grisha and Zarrick with a smile. "She does seem more relaxed here." "That is because Lady Ashford does not tolerate nonsense," Sarah said. "Bigotry, harassment, any of it. Had a man fired last harvest for making comments about one of the dwarf workers, made it clear that behavior would not be accepted on her land." "I wish more people thought that way," Benjamin said quietly. Sarah gave him a knowing look. "Trouble back home." "You could say that. The village does not approve of me hiring an orc farmhand. Their loss. She is one of the best workers here." Sarah took a drink from her cup. "For what it is worth, I think you are doing the right thing. World needs more people willing to look past what someone is and see who they are." The simple support nearly undid him. Benjamin swallowed hard. "Thank you. That means more than you know." Over the following days, Benjamin made an effort to connect with the other workers, to build the network of allies he had hoped to find. He learned that Sarah ran a small dairy farm to the east. A man named John managed a mill. A young couple, newly married, were saving up to buy their own land. All of them were practical, hardworking people who judged others by their actions rather than their species, and all of them thought Grisha was an asset, not a threat. Benjamin began to feel hope stirring again. Maybe they could make this work. Maybe with enough people vouching for Grisha, the village would eventually back down. The turning point came in the third week, during a particularly difficult day in the orchards. Benjamin was high in an apple tree, reaching for a cluster of fruit, when the branch beneath his feet cracked. He had a split second to realize he was falling, to see the ground rushing up at him, and then strong hands caught him. Grisha had been walking past with a load of wheat, and had somehow moved fast enough to position herself under him. She set him on his feet gently, her hands steadying him until his legs stopped shaking. "Are you all right?" she asked, her eyes scanning him for injuries. "Fine. Thanks to you." Benjamin's heart was still racing, adrenaline making his hands shake. "That is the second time you have saved me from a bad fall." "Try to make it the last," she said dryly. "I am running out of dramatic rescues." Benjamin laughed, slightly hysterical, and then, without thinking, he hugged her. It was awkward and impulsive and probably inappropriate, but he could not help it. She had saved him again, appeared out of nowhere to catch him, and the rush of gratitude and relief demanded expression. For a moment, Grisha stood frozen. Then, slowly, her arms came up to return the embrace. She was warm and solid and strong, and Benjamin let himself lean into that strength for just a moment. When they pulled apart, there were workers watching them with knowing smiles. Benjamin felt his face heat, but no one said anything mocking. If anything, the looks were approving. Sarah caught up with him later that evening. "So," she said with a grin, "you and the orc woman, is it like that?" Benjamin's blush deepened. "It is not we are just friends." "Uh-huh, friends who look at each other like you do." Sarah's expression softened. "For the record, I think you would make a good pair. She is clearly devoted to you and you light up when she is around. Life is short. Do not waste it on what other people think you should want." Her words stayed with him as the harvest drew to a close. He caught himself watching Grisha more, noticing the way she smiled when she thought no one was looking, the gentleness in her hands when she helped bundle wheat, the sound of her laugh when Zarrick told a joke. And he caught her watching him too, her amber eyes soft and warm, her expression unguarded in ways it never was back home. The last day of the harvest arrived, and Lady Ashford gathered everyone for final payments and farewells. She thanked them all for their hard work, handed out wages in small leather pouches, and encouraged everyone to return next year. When she reached Benjamin and Grisha, she paused. "You two did excellent work, some of the best I have seen. I hope you will come back next summer." "We would be honored, my lady," Benjamin said. Lady Ashford glanced between them, and Benjamin had the uncomfortable feeling she was seeing more than he wanted to reveal. But she just smiled and said, "Take care of each other, and do not let small-minded fools dictate your lives." As workers began dispersing, heading back to their various homes, Benjamin felt a pang of sadness. For 3 weeks, he and Grisha had lived in a place where they were accepted, where their partnership was seen as normal and good. Going back to the village and its hostility felt like walking back into a cage. Grisha seemed to feel the same way. As they packed up their belongings, she was quieter than usual, her movements slow. "We do not have to go back," Benjamin said suddenly. She looked up, surprised. "What?" "We do not have to go back to the village. We could go somewhere else. Start over somewhere people do not already have their minds made up about us." The idea was taking shape even as he spoke. Lady Ashford said there are frontier settlements west of here, mixed communities where species does not matter as much. We could sell my farm, use the money to start fresh somewhere new. Grisha stared at him. "You would leave your father's farm, your home?" "If it meant we could build a better life, yes." Benjamin stepped closer. "Grisha, these last 3 weeks have shown me what things could be like. Working together without constantly looking over our shoulders, being accepted for who we are rather than judged for what we are. I want more of that." "Do you not?" "Of course I do," she said quietly. "But Benjamin, that is a huge decision. You should not make it impulsively." "It is not impulsive. I have been thinking about it for weeks." He took a deep breath. "I care about you, Grisha, more than I probably should. More than just as a friend or a business partner. And I know the world we live in makes that complicated, maybe even impossible. But I would rather try to build something real with you in a place that might accept us than spend the rest of my life pretending I feel less than I do." The confession hung between them, raw and honest, and Benjamin felt his heart hammering as he waited for her response. Grisha's eyes were wide, her expression a mixture of shock and something that looked almost like hope. "You care about me, romantically?" "Yes," Benjamin said simply. "I know it is probably foolish, and I know I am risking our friendship by saying it, but I could not leave here without you knowing the truth. You deserve to know." She took a step toward him, then another, until they were standing close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her amber eyes. "You stupid, wonderful human," she said softly. "Do you really think you are alone in feeling this way?" Benjamin's breath caught. "You mean?" "I mean I have been half in love with you since you defended me to that store owner in the village," Grisha said. "I mean I think about you constantly. Wonder what it would be like to be more than just your employee or your friend. But I convinced myself it was impossible, that you could never see me as anything but the orc woman who works your fields." "I see you," Benjamin said urgently. "I see Grisha. Strong, kind, brave, beautiful Grisha. That is who you are to me." Her hand came up to cup his face, her touch gentle despite her strength. "Beautiful, beautiful," he confirmed. Grisha laughed, a sound of pure joy, and then she was kissing him. It was clumsy at first. They had to navigate the difference in their heights, the awkwardness of her small tusks, the newness of it all. But it was also perfect, warm and sweet and full of promise. Benjamin's hands found her waist and hers tangled in his hair, and for a long, perfect moment nothing else mattered. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. Grisha rested her forehead against his, her eyes closed. So, she said, the frontier, starting over. You are serious about that? Completely serious, Benjamin said. If you want it too. I want it, she said. I want to build a life with you, Benjamin, somewhere we can just be ourselves without constantly fighting for the right to exist. Then that is what we will do. He kissed her again, brief and sweet. Together, they left the Ashford estate the next morning with a plan. They would return to the farm, harvest what they could, and prepare to sell the property. It would take time, these things always did, but they were both willing to be patient. The journey home was different from the journey out. They walked closer together, hands occasionally brushing. They talked about the future, about what kind of place they wanted to find, what kind of life they wanted to build. It was tentative and hopeful and terrifying, but it was theirs. When they crested the last hill and saw the farm spread out below them, Benjamin felt a complicated mix of emotions. This place held so many memories, so much of his family's history. Leaving it felt like a betrayal, but staying felt like giving up on his own future. They were still lost in thought when they noticed the smoke. Benjamin's heart stopped. Smoke was rising from the direction of his farm, thick and dark. He started running, Grisha right beside him, both of them sprinting down the hill with terror driving them forward. The barn was on fire. Flames engulfed the structure, roaring and crackling, sending embers spiraling into the air. Benjamin ran toward it without thinking, but Grisha grabbed him and hauled him back. "The animals," he shouted. "I have to get them out. The barn is empty," a voice said. They spun to find Paul Foster standing at the edge of the property, his face grim. Behind him were several other men from the village, and to Benjamin's shock, they were holding his cow and chickens, keeping the animals well away from the flames. "What?" Benjamin started. "We did not set the fire," Paul said quickly. "We were coming to check on your place, make sure everything was all right while you were gone. Found it already burning. Managed to get the animals out before it spread too far." Benjamin stared at him, trying to process this. "You saved my animals." "Of course we did. We are not monsters." Paul looked uncomfortable. "Look, Benjamin, I know we have not treated you fairly, you or your worker. The council has been talking, and we realize we may have been too harsh, reacting out of fear instead of reason. What changed?" Benjamin asked, his voice flat. Paul glanced at the other men, then back at Benjamin. "We heard reports from the Ashford harvest, about how hard you both worked, how well you got along with the other laborers. Lady Ashford herself sent a letter praising your orc woman's work ethic and character." He sighed. "Made us realize we might have been wrong about her, about this whole situation." Grisha made a disbelieving sound. "So you waited until we were gone to burn down the barn anyway?" "We did not burn it," Paul insisted. "We think it was Foster's boy and his friends. The same idiots who trampled your fields a while back. They have been bragging about running you off for weeks. When they heard you were both gone, they must have seen an opportunity." "Where are they now?" Benjamin demanded. "In custody. The magistrate is coming from the capital to deal with them." "Arson is a serious crime." Paul met his eyes. "I am sorry, Benjamin, for all of it, for not standing up to the council sooner, for letting the harassment go as far as it did. You deserve better. You both do." Benjamin looked at the burning barn, at his terrified animals, at the neighbors who had rushed in to save what they could despite their previous hostility. He felt Grisha's hand slip into his, her grip steadying him. "Thank you," he said finally, "for saving the animals, for coming to help." "It is the least we could do." Paul hesitated, then added, "If you are willing to stay, the village would like to make amends. Help rebuild the barn, make it clear that you and Grisha are welcome here. But I understand if you would rather leave, after everything we have put you through." Benjamin and Grisha exchanged a long look. In her eyes, he saw the same conflict he felt. The frontier still called to them, promised a fresh start without the weight of old prejudices. But this was his home, his father's legacy. And these people, flawed as they were at least trying to do better. "Can we think about it?" Benjamin asked. Paul nodded. "Take all the time you need. We will be here either way." The villagers stayed to help put out the fire, forming a bucket brigade to keep the flames from spreading to the house. By the time the barn collapsed into smoking ruins, it was well past midnight and everyone was exhausted. Benjamin and Grisha stood together, watching the last of the embers die, and he felt her lean against his side. "What do you want to do?" she asked quietly. "I do not know," Benjamin admitted. "Part of me wants to leave to take the fresh start we talked about. But another part thinks maybe we could do more good by staying, by showing people that humans and orcs can build something together. It would not be easy. Even with the village trying to make amends, there will still be people who object, still be obstacles." "I know." He turned to face her fully. "But we would face them together, and maybe if we can make it work here, it would make it easier for others like us in the future." Grisha smiled, tired but genuine. "You are an optimist, Benjamin Zarrick. Is that a bad thing?" "No. It is one of the things I love about you." The casual use of the word love made his heart skip. "So we stay," she considered for a long moment, then nodded. "We stay, build the barn back better, show them what we are capable of, and if it does not work out, we can always leave later." "Together," Benjamin said. "Together," she agreed. They sealed the promise with a kiss, there in the ashes of the old barn with the dawn breaking over the horizon. The rebuilding took most of the summer. True to their word, the villagers came out to help. Paul Foster brought lumber from the mill. Thomas the blacksmith contributed nails and metal fittings. Even Margaret from the general store showed up with food for the workers, though she still gave Grisha wary looks. But most people were at least trying. They asked Grisha about orc building techniques and incorporated some of her suggestions into the new barn design. They spoke to her directly instead of talking around her. It was not perfect acceptance, but it was progress. Benjamin and Grisha worked alongside them, and slowly the new barn took shape, larger than the old one, sturdier, built to last another 3 generations at least. During the long days of work, Benjamin saw attitudes shifting. The villagers who worked side by side with Grisha saw her strength, yes, but also her patience, her skill, her dry sense of humor. They saw Benjamin's obvious affection for her and her protective care of him. They saw a partnership that worked, that made both people better. And slowly, grudgingly, most of them started to accept it. There were still holdouts, still people who muttered about unnatural relationships and cross-species contamination. But they were outnumbered now by those willing to give Grisha a chance. When the barn was finally finished, the village threw a small celebration. Nothing fancy, just a gathering with food and drink and music, a chance to mark the accomplishment and move forward. Benjamin found himself standing with Lady Ashford, who had traveled down to see the completed structure and had brought a gift of livestock to help restock his farm. "You have done well," she said, surveying the barn with approval. "Both of you. This is good, solid work." "We could not have done it without help," Benjamin said. "Help that you earned by proving yourself worthy of it, by refusing to back down when it would have been easier to give up." Lady Ashford turned to look at him directly. "Your father would be proud, Benjamin. You have honored his legacy while also forging your own path." The words meant more than she could know. Benjamin blinked back unexpected tears. "Thank you, my lady." She patted his shoulder, then moved on to speak with other guests, and Benjamin went to find Grisha. She was standing slightly apart from the main group, nursing a cup of ale and watching the festivities with a small smile. He came up beside her and slipped his hand into hers. "Having fun?" he asked. "It is strange," she said. "Being part of a celebration instead of just watching from the outside. Good strange, but strange. You will get used to it. We are part of this community now, whether they like it or not," Grisha laughed. "Stubborn human." "Stubborn orc," he countered affectionately. They stood together, watching their neighbors laugh and dance, and slowly, tentatively, accept that the world was bigger and stranger than they had imagined. As the sun set and lanterns were lit, Paul Foster climbed onto a makeshift platform and called for attention. The crowd quieted, turning to listen. "I want to say something," Paul began, his voice carrying over the assembly. "These past months have not been easy. We have had to confront some uncomfortable truths about ourselves, about our fears and prejudices. Benjamin, Zarrick, and Grisha have challenged us to be better, to see past what we thought we knew and recognize the humanity, the personhood in everyone, regardless of species." He paused, looking directly at Benjamin and Grisha. "We have not always risen to that challenge. We have let fear guide us instead of compassion. But Benjamin and Grisha did not give up on us, even when we had given them every reason to leave. They stayed and worked and showed us what real courage looks like." There were murmurs of agreement from the crowd. Paul continued, "So tonight, I want to formally apologize on behalf of the village council and all those who treated you poorly. We were wrong, and we are grateful for the chance to do better. To all of you, I raise my glass to Benjamin and Grisha, and to the future we will build together." "To Benjamin and Grisha," the crowd echoed, raising their glasses. Benjamin felt tears prick his eyes again. He looked at Grisha and saw she was similarly moved, her jaw tight with emotion. "We should say something," she murmured. "You want to make a speech? We should thank them. Together." Benjamin nodded and they stepped forward, moving to where Paul had been standing. The crowd quieted again, waiting. Benjamin spoke first. "Thank you. For the apology, for the help with the barn, for being willing to change. It takes real courage to admit when you are wrong, and we appreciate it more than words can express." Grisha picked up where he left off, her deeper voice calm and clear. "I came to this village expecting nothing but suspicion and hostility. Instead, I found work, friendship, and eventually a home. Not because people here were perfect, but because they were willing to try. That is all anyone can ask." "We are not going anywhere," Benjamin said, reclaiming Grisha's hand. "This is our home now, our community, and we will work as hard as we can to make it a better place for everyone." "Together," Grisha added, squeezing his hand. The crowd applauded, and then someone started playing a fiddle, and the party resumed with renewed energy. People came up to congratulate them, to shake hands, to offer tentative friendships. It was not perfect. There would still be challenges ahead, still be people who could not accept them, still be days when the weight of others' judgment felt too heavy to bear. But they had each other. They had a community willing to grow, and they had hope. As the party wound down and people began drifting home, Benjamin and Grisha walked back to the house together, hand in hand under the stars. "I was thinking," Benjamin said as they reached the porch. "Dangerous activity," Grisha teased. He smiled. "I was thinking about the future, about us. And I realized that I do not want to just be your employer or your partner or even your lover. I want more than that." Grisha stopped walking, turning to face him with wide eyes. "Benjamin." He took both her hands in his heart racing. "Grisha, I know we have only been together a few months. I know the world does not make things easy for people like us. But I also know that I love you, more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. You make me braver, better, happier. You are my best friend and my greatest adventure, and I cannot imagine my life without you in it." He took a deep breath. "So I am asking, even though it is probably too soon and definitely impractical and possibly impossible, Grisha, will you marry me? For a long moment, Grisha just stared at him, her expression unreadable. Benjamin's heart sank. He had moved too fast, assumed too much, ruined everything. Then she was kissing him, fierce and joyful, and he had to brace himself against the porch railing to keep from being knocked over by the force of her enthusiasm. When she finally pulled back, she was grinning. "Yes," she said. "Yes, you foolish, wonderful human, I will marry you." Relief and joy crashed over him in equal measure. "Really, you are sure?" "I am completely sure. I love you, Benjamin Zarrick. I want to build a life with you, face whatever comes together, so yes, 1,000 times yes." They kissed again, slower this time, savoring the moment. When they finally made it inside, they stayed up half the night talking about the future, where they would have the ceremony, who they would invite, what it would mean for them and for the community. "It will be controversial," Grisha warned. "A human-orc marriage. Some people will never accept it." "Some people will never accept anything new," Benjamin countered, "but others will. And maybe our marriage will make it easier for the next couple and the couple after that. Maybe we are starting something bigger than just us." "Look at you, changing the world," Grisha said fondly. "We are changing it," Benjamin corrected. "Together." They planned the wedding for the fall after the harvest was in. It gave them time to prepare, to let the news spread, to deal with whatever reactions came their way. The reactions were mixed. Most of the village, having already been through the process of accepting Grisha as a person and as part of their community, took the engagement in stride. Some were even enthusiastic, particularly the younger villagers who saw Benjamin and Grisha's relationship as romantic rather than scandalous. But there were objections too. A few of the more traditional families expressed concern about the precedent it would set. The village priest initially refused to perform the ceremony, citing religious doctrine, though he eventually relented after a long conversation with Lady Ashford about the true meaning of love and commitment. Grisha's clan sent a message through Zarrick, who had become a regular visitor now that he knew where to find her. The message was curt. Her family wished her well, but would not be attending any human ceremony. The rejection hurt. Benjamin could see it in her eyes, but Grisha held her head high. "Their loss," she said firmly. "We will make our own family, our own traditions." They spent the summer preparing not just for the wedding but for the life beyond it. They expanded the farm, adding new fields and diversifying crops. They hired a young human man from the village as additional help. And Benjamin felt a quiet satisfaction in providing the kind of employment opportunity he had once given Grisha. They also traveled, visiting other mixed communities, and learning how different places handled cross-species relationships. Some were hostile, others accepting, most fell somewhere in between. But everywhere they went, they met other couples like them, human and orc, elf and dwarf. Every combination imaginable, all trying to build lives in a world that did not always want them to succeed. "We are not alone," Grisha said one night as they camped under the stars during one of these journeys. "I thought we were, but we are not. There are others like us everywhere. Fighting the same battles," Benjamin agreed. "Maybe we should do something about that. Organize, support each other." "Start a revolution," Grisha grinned. "Something like that." The idea stayed with them as they returned home and continued their preparations. By the time autumn arrived and the crops were safely harvested, they had the beginnings of a plan, a network of mixed couples and families who could support each other, share resources, advocate for legal changes that would protect their relationships. But first, the wedding. They held it on a perfect October day, when the leaves were turning gold and red and the air had just the first hint of winter's chill. The ceremony took place in the newly built barn, decorated with fall flowers and ribbons, every available space filled with people. The turnout amazed Benjamin. Not just the village, though most of them came, but also workers from the Ashford estate, mixed couples they had met on their travels, even a delegation of orcs from Garak's clan who had come despite Grisha's family's absence. Lady Ashford stood as Benjamin's witness. Garak stood as Grisha's. The village priest, looking nervous but determined, led them through the traditional vows with only minor modifications to acknowledge the unique nature of their union. Do you, Benjamin Zarrick, take this woman to be your wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish as long as you both shall live? I do, Benjamin said, his voice clear and steady, his eyes locked on Grisha's. You, Grisha, take this man to be your husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish as long as you both shall live. I do, Grisha said, and her smile could have lit the whole barn. They exchanged rings, simple metal bands that Grisha had helped Thomas the blacksmith forge, inscribed with words in both human common and orcish. Benjamin slipped one onto her finger and she did the same for him, their hands trembling slightly. Then, by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife, the priest said. You may kiss. They did, to enthusiastic applause and cheering from the assembled crowd. And in that moment, with Grisha's arms around him and their friends and family celebrating around them, Benjamin felt like the luckiest man alive. The reception lasted well into the night. There was food and music and dancing, stories and toasts and laughter. Benjamin danced with his new wife, her strong arms guiding him through steps he barely knew, and did not care that they probably looked ridiculous. He was too happy to care about anything except the joy on Grisha's face. Lady Ashford cornered them during a lull in the festivities, pressing a sealed envelope into Benjamin's hands. A wedding gift, she said. Do not open it until tomorrow. They thanked her profusely, and she waved them off with a smile before sweeping away to dance with the magistrate. Finally, as the moon rose high and the guests began to drift away, Benjamin and Grisha escaped to the house. They had prepared the bedroom specially, filling it with candles and flowers, turning it into a sanctuary just for them. The envelope from Lady Ashford sat on the bedside table, and curiosity got the better of them. Benjamin opened it to find a deed to a parcel of land adjacent to his current farm, doubling their property size. She bought us land, Grisha breathed, as a wedding gift. We can expand the farm properly now, Benjamin said, still stunned. Build something really substantial, maybe even hire more workers, create more opportunities for people who need them. We could do so much good, Grisha agreed. Build the kind of community we wished existed everywhere. They talked late into the night about plans and dreams, about the future they would build together. And when they finally slept, it was tangled together, safe and warm and completely content. The first year of marriage was an adjustment, as all first years are. They learned each other's habits and quirks, navigated disagreements and compromises, figured out how to combine two lives into one partnership. But it was also joyful. Working the expanded farm together, watching their plans take shape, building friendships with the other mixed couples they had met. They started hosting gatherings, bringing together humans and orcs and everyone in between for dinners and celebrations and mutual support. The network they had dreamed of began to take real form. Letters were exchanged, visits made, resources shared. Slowly, incrementally, the world began to shift. It was not a revolution, not yet, but it was change, real and lasting. 3 years after their wedding, Grisha came to Benjamin with news that made his heart soar. She was pregnant. The revelation was terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. Mixed-species children were rare but not unheard of, and there were risks. But there was also joy, the promise of a future that combined the best of both of them. Their daughter was born in early spring, during a rainstorm that reminded Benjamin of the flood that had first brought Grisha into his life. She had her mother's green skin and her father's brown eyes, small tusks that would grow more prominent with age, and a powerful set of lungs that announced her presence to the world. They named her Emma after Benjamin's mother, and she became the heart of their home. The village, which had come so far in accepting Benjamin and Grisha's relationship, embraced Emma with surprising enthusiasm. Margaret from the general store knitted tiny clothes. Paul Foster's wife made a cradle. The children of the village, who had grown up seeing Benjamin and Grisha as a normal part of their community, were delighted to have a new baby to fuss over. Emma grew up surrounded by love and acceptance, by humans and orcs and everyone in between. She learned her father's patience and her mother's strength, developed a fierce sense of justice and an irrepressible curiosity about the world, and she was not alone. Other mixed couples in their network were having children too, creating a whole generation of kids who would grow up knowing that love transcended species, that family came in all forms. On Emma's 5th birthday, Benjamin stood in the barn, the third incarnation now, expanded again to accommodate their growing farm, and watched his daughter play with the other children. Human, orc, half-blood, all of them laughing and running together without a thought to who was different. Grisha came up beside him, sliding an arm around his waist. "Thinking deep thoughts, just remembering," Benjamin said. "The day we met, the flood, the bridge, you carrying me across without a word." "Best decision I ever made," Grisha said. "Second best," Benjamin corrected. "The best was saying yes when I asked you to marry me," she laughed. "Fair point. Though really, the best decision was made by both of us choosing to build this life together, choosing love over fear." Benjamin pulled her close, watching their daughter play, surrounded by the community they had built and the future they had fought for. "I would not change a single moment of it. Even the parts where the village tried to run me out of town, even those, they made us stronger." "Made this," he gestured at the scene before them, mean more. Grisha kissed his temple. "You are getting sentimental in your old age. I am 28. Ancient," she teased. They stood together, content and complete, watching the next generation grow up in a world that was slowly, steadily becoming better. It was not perfect, would probably never be perfect, but it was theirs. And it had all started with floodwaters and a destroyed bridge, with an orc woman who chose kindness over caution and a human man who chose to say thank you instead of goodbye. Sometimes the smallest acts of compassion change everything. Sometimes helping a stranger across a river leads to a lifetime of love. Sometimes choosing hope over fear builds a bridge stronger than any made of stone. Benjamin and Grisha had learned that lesson well, and they spent the rest of their lives teaching it to others through their marriage, their family, their community, and the network of love and acceptance that spread out from their small farm like ripples on water. The floods had taken the old bridge, but they had built something far better in its place. Not a structure of stone and mortar, but a connection of hearts and hands and stubborn, persistent hope. And it would stand, they knew, for generations to come.